The world of Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid is a world run on war, and its stories are those of the soldiers who try to find meaning in a life defined by meaningless battle. But every tragedy has a beginning, and in 2004, Metal Gear Solid 3: Snake Eater revealed how it all began with one soldier's sacrifice, one soldier's disillusionment, and a legacy of endlessly changing war. When Kojima's original Metal Gear video game premiered in 1987, it followed a fairly straightforward story. Special Forces operative Solid Snake infiltrates the fortified military state of Outer Heaven to destroy their walking nuclear tank, codenamed Metal Gear. Soon, Snake discovers that Outer Heaven is controlled by his own commander, Big Boss, pushing him into final conflict with his superior. Metal Gear was soon followed by Metal Gear 2: Solid Snake in 1990, with another splintered military state, another Metal Gear, and another fight with Big Boss. But it was Metal Gear Solid, which debuted in 1998 for the PlayStation, that unveiled Kojima's true vision for the franchise. The story saw Solid Snake come out of retirement to stop the renegade military unit Foxhound from launching a nuclear attack, only to discover the existence of his twin brother Liquid Snake, and the fact that they were both cloned from Big Boss, in the hopes of creating a new generation of legendary soldiers. And with this revelation of intergenerational endless warfare, Kojima created a complex and tragic saga that would play out for another 20 years of games. While Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty would push the franchise further towards stranger and denser ideas regarding ideological warfare, the beating heart of the franchise, and the start of its long journey to find meaning in the world, is Metal Gear Solid 3. This PlayStation 2 game serves as a prequel that takes players back to 1964 for a Cold War mission, starring the man who will come to be known as Big Boss, and who for now is codenamed Naked Snake. As the game begins, Snake is sent deep into the Soviet Union to help Soviet scientist Sokolov defect, and prevent the maniacal Colonel Volgin from gaining use of the Shagohod, a nuclear predecessor of the Metal Gear. But when Snake's mentor, the Boss, betrays him and ruins the mission, Snake's skills and loyalties are put to the test.
To put it simply, in order to avoid a full-scale nuclear conflict, we have to prove that America was not involved in that explosion.
And eliminating the Boss ourselves will prove America's innocence?
Right. The higher-ups have decided that you're the only one capable of pulling this off.
Kojima and his team stuff a lot of weirdness and comedic self-reference into each Metal Gear game.
Metal Gear?
It can't be denied that there's some real dumb stuff, and it sometimes pulls players out of the game. But there's a beating human heart in MGS that makes all these weird stories still connect with audiences. The overall story arc of the Metal Gear series doesn't always make sense, and can get far too esoteric for its own good, especially in the final few games. But the best entries in the series, and the best moments overall, have a penetrative focus on its central characters, and illustrate how lifelong war eats away at the soul. It's that focus that makes Metal Gear Solid 3 so special. It's a bombastic story that combines James Bond-esque espionage with sci-fi action and real-world political anxiety to make players both revel in deadly combat and mourn the inevitability of their decisions. There's a recurring theme of internal division running throughout Kojima's prequel game, and it presents itself through Metal Gear Solid 3's balance between player choice and inevitable consequences within its combat system. Its story of continually forming factional rifts that drive the central conflict forward, and the dueling characters of the Boss and Snake. This division creates a tragedy about a loyal soldier who must choose between remaining a cog within the larger machine or being slowly devoured by disillusionment.
You are a natural-born fighter, but you're not quite a soldier. A soldier is a political tool, nothing more. That's doubly true if he's a career soldier. Right and wrong have no place in his mission.
Every Metal Gear Solid game is accurately described by its subheader, Tactical Espionage Action. Playing as a Black Ops soldier, the player infiltrates an enemy base and is surrounded by danger, requiring you to use stealth tactics and precision combat to succeed. While this means that stealth and less violence are usually the best ways to stay alive, Kojima's series ultimately leaves that decision up to the player. You can rely on your tranquilizer handgun and close quarters combat to knock out soldiers, or you can blast away with the heavy artillery you collect. In previous Metal Gear games, the consequences of these actions really only mattered in the player's mind and not the game itself. But in Snake Eater, Kojima decides to confront Snake, and the player with his or her decisions. After hours of combat and numerous boss fights, a late-in-the-game battle against the Sorrow, the spirit of a dead psychic soldier, forces you to confront every single person you've killed.
Now you will know the sorrow of those whose lives you have ended.
Kill lots of people and you'll have to walk the length of an extremely long river of the dead. Keep a non-lethal approach and the journey will be relatively short. Through this journey, the Sorrow, who is killed due to shifting global tensions, brings Snake into direct conflict with each time he chose to kill someone. That is the ultimate illustration of choice in Snake Eater, but it also highlights the game's inevitable violence. General of the US Army Omar N. Bradley said, "Wars can be prevented just as surely as they can be provoked, and we who fail to prevent them must share the guilt for the dead." As Naked Snake works his way to stopping Volgin and the Shagohod, he comes into conflict with the members of the Cobra Unit, a legendary group of soldiers who fought alongside the boss during World War II and are now allied with Volgin's insurgent Russian military group. The pain, the fear, the end, and the fury are flamboyantly designed by Yoji Shinkawa and reflect the emotional scars of war. They're all soldiers without a nation, inevitably pulled into a life of conflict that can only end violently. These soldiers were once allied with the boss, then split apart by the Cold War, leading to the death of former member the Sorrow, and then once again pulled together by Volgin, illustrating the arbitrariness of war, and how their solidarity or division are simply the result of power changing hands. Even if the player has chosen non-fatal actions throughout Snake Eater, each Cobra Unit member must die, whether it's shown through the sheer panic of the fear or the peaceful resignation of the end. Each soldier dies on the battlefield due to Snake's actions, suddenly exploding from the microbomb inside them designed to guarantee that each would die on the battlefield, because everything else in life had lost meaning to them.
I'm off. Join the sorrow.
There's an inevitability to everything within MGS3. The inevitability of war, the inevitability of death, the inevitability of all the sacrifices someone has made eventually becoming meaningless because someone else has taken power. Every Metal Gear Solid game is a tragedy in some form, but by creating a prequel in Snake Eater, Kojima and crew reveal the origin of the violence that afflicts Solid Snake, his friends, and the world at large. Snake Eater is a game about war. A Cold War perhaps, but still a war. Kojima reiterates again and again that Snake, the Cobras, the boss, Revolver Ocelot, Eva, and every nameless soldier they face are pawns moved about by leaders who will never know their names. Ideologies and national beliefs once motivated Snake and his fellow soldiers to pick up arms, but the Snake Eater mission slowly devours these beliefs as Snake is forced to kill men and women who are just like him, only carrying different flags. Snake Eater and the Metal Gear series as a whole is strongly anti-war, but it's sympathetic to soldiers. It rarely judges those who serve in the military, and instead judges those in power who abuse their control over armed forces. To quote Aldous Huxley, "The most shocking fact about war is that its victims and its instruments are individual human beings, and that these individual beings are condemned by the monstrous conventions of politics to murder or be murdered in quarrels not their own." Each MGS game has an overarching single-word theme. Gene for 1, meme for 2, and scene for 3. Now, we don't have time to unpack all that, but scene in particular is in reference to how people, and specifically soldiers, are the unwilling victims of the global scene of their times, which will inevitably shift, rendering their forced decisions meaningless in the future. Just because the Soviet Union and the United States are enemies in 1964 doesn't mean they'll be enemies in the future. So what greater purpose does the Snake Eater mission have when seen in the constantly shifting scene of human history?
Enemies change along with the times, the flow of the ages, and we soldiers are forced to play along.
The unavoidable death that comes from two opposing sides coming into conflict is crystallized in the game's climactic moment, and a decision that leaves the player and Snake with no choice but to be the cause of more death. By setting Snake Eater in the 60s, Kojima's game is able to take advantage of two aspects of the time period. One is the James Bond-esque style of suave, exhilarating, sexually charged espionage action. That's all over the game's cutscenes, its romance between Eva and Snake, and of course, its theme song. The other 60s touchstone is the real-world Cold War tensions of the time, a time in which the world seemed to inch inevitably closer to nuclear conflict and the end of life as we know it. That's the opposite of Bond. The cartoonish, escapist qualities of Bond found in Snake's adventure are brought plummeting back to Earth when the horrific reality of nuclear war comes into focus. The game's spirits fall, much like Snake falls in his metaphorical halo jump at the game's start. An inevitable transformation into Big Boss, the villain responsible for, or whose memory motivated, most of the conflicts in previous games. But Snake's transformation over the decades is only one part of a century of global conflict. The history that informs Snake Eater is defined by continual division, a splitting of factions that perpetuates war. MGS3 may pick up in 1964, but the MGS saga begins in 1918 with the end of World War I, as a group known as the Philosophers are formed by wealthy intellectuals from the United States, the Soviet Union, and China to prevent future wars and control the world. However, gradual corruption and a change in guard turned the Philosophers into a war machine, funding weaponry and moving the world into conflict, leading to World War II, which creates the Cobra Unit, and the Cold War, which permanently breaks apart the Philosophers and perpetuates a century of war. So many of the reasons for the battles in Snake Eater are doled out in sudden bursts of exposition, revealing the banality of conflict to both Snake and the player over time. But the most important may be the history of the boss.
Half of me belongs to the boss.
Do you love her?
No, nothing like that.
Do you hate her?
Does it have to be one or the other? Love or hate?
The boss is the daughter of one of the original Philosophers. Russian soldier Revolver Ocelot is her child with the Sorrow, and the boss killed the Sorrow during a Cold War mission that put them on opposite sides. Throughout Snake Eater, the boss shows small signs of being tormented by her past decisions and current betrayal. But as we'll soon see, she's actually a loyal soldier, committing to the whims of her country, but still wishing for peace that can save soldiers' lives. While there is an internal divide within the boss, Snake Eater is about a divide forming within Snake and ultimately breaking him apart. If Snake Eater is the story of a mission slowly eating Snake, then there are a few physical signs, but mostly the destruction is a philosophical one. Snake is tortured, breaks quite a few bones, and loses an eye, but he initially maintains his loyalty to the United States. Eventually, Snake and Eva kill Volgin, destroy the Shagohod, and take the Philosopher's legacy, funds that will start a new group to control the world. And it's a moment of triumph. The high-stakes thrills that echo the Bond inspiration for the game and the coolest aspects of the series. It's followed by pure tragedy, and once again, the inevitable death and destruction caused by war. The final confrontation between Snake and the boss.
One must die, and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss. And the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle.
There is a central choice illustrated by these dueling characters. Does one sacrifice themselves for something greater, whether that is a nation's goals, a leader's commands, or possibly even world peace? Or do they become disillusioned with the values of nations and war, even if it permanently destroys the purpose within them? On one side of this choice is the boss, who has both fought and helped Snake during his mission. And on the other side is Snake, who must kill the boss to ultimately prove his loyalty to America and successfully complete this mission. Even with everything he's been through, killing the boss is the most painful thing Snake must do, and the player must pull the trigger.
Snake, you're a wonderful man. Kill me. Kill me now. Do it.
Afterward, Snake Eater reveals its final secret, the truth that permanently fractures Snake's beliefs. The boss was never a traitor. She only posed as one to steal the philosopher's legacy, but the US government changed the mission and told Boss she had to let Snake kill her to save the world. Eva, secretly an agent for China, reveals the truth to Snake at the game's end. In retrospect, it makes all of Snake Eater a terrible tragedy and turns the boss into the true hero of the game. On first playthrough, it would seem as if Snake was the loyal patriot and Boss the disillusioned soldier, but this final reveal reverses their roles.
She didn't betray the United States. No. Far from it. She was a hero who died for her country. She carried out her mission knowing full well what was going to happen. Self-sacrifice. Because that was her duty.
The boss was completely aware of the futility of war in the larger, shifting global scene, but chose to sacrifice herself for her country and for Snake, and forever be known as a traitor. Now, Snake is seen as a greater hero and given the name Big Boss, but internally he's become completely disillusioned with the US, war, and his own beliefs. The truth sets Snake free from blind loyalty to a country whose constantly changing purpose for him would make his life meaningless. But what purpose does his life have now? "There is no hunting like the hunting of man," said Ernest Hemingway, "and those who have hunted armed men long enough and liked it never care for anything else thereafter." By the end, the man who was once a loyal soldier has become Big Boss, a man without a country, at least in his heart. In the years following Snake Eater, the world only grows more divided. Big Boss and Major Zero create the Patriots, but they soon split over their desires for the world. Freedom for soldiers versus control over the Earth. Multiple Metal Gear games are set into motion by disillusioned soldiers breaking off from their governments to form a new seat of power. Outer Heaven, Zanzibar Land, Shadow Moses, Big Shell. Split after split after split. But the most painful divide is within the man now known as Big Boss. He's an eternal soldier, knowing little other purpose beyond permanent war, but without a country to fight for. And his battle for a future where soldiers will not die over the constantly changing, ultimately meaningless whims of their government leads to another generation of soldiers identical in appearance, but fatally divided in purpose. Future games will fill in the decades that separate Snake Eater from the original Metal Gear, but the end of MGS3 has permanently set Big Boss on a decades-long descent. And while the rest of the Metal Gear saga will be a story of trying to find peace, both personally and globally, what war has torn apart can never truly be made whole again.